It's working. Clicker. Okay, so you guys won the prize so far. This is the biggest crowd we've had on this plan. Thank you so much for coming out. This was great. Good job, good going, Mariposa. Yeah, all right. We're excited to hear this, right? Okay, so am I. I'm excited to share it. As Chris said, I'm Kathleen Morse, the Division Chief for Planning here in the park. I have a number of folks that work for me here in the room that I'd like to just briefly make note of. Mike Yoakum, raise your hand, Mike. Mike's the project manager for the Tuolumne River Plan, our other major plan that's going on. In the back, we have Rachel Collins. She's our visitor use user capacity specialist. Elizabeth Munding, she's our right-hand man when it comes to production and web design and a number of other things. May France is a jack of all trades, works extremely well with GIS, extremely competent in mapping and calculations and other things like that that have been done to support the planning effort. Jim Donovan here in front is our site planning expert, has done a lot of the site designs and just a general jack of all trades too. So we have a really good group. Did I miss anybody from Planning Division? Okay, good. They're an excellent team. They're some of the best people I've ever worked with. So we have two plans on the street right now, two river plans. One is the Tuolumne River Plan, and this is the cover of it. The second one is the Merced River Plan. This is the cover here. You've probably seen both of them by now, floating around. We're in the public comment period for both plans, and they're both done under the direction of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. So that is why we've issued them at the same time. And what you'll see in this presentation, we're going to focus on the Merced Plan, but the foundational basis for both of these plans is very similar. So when you take away something from this presentation, you can apply it to your review of the Tuolumne River Plan as well. We've tried to be very consistent in our methodology and the systematic process that we've used to develop these plans, and both plans share that approach. So where are we in this process? I mean, why are these documents so large? What is a draft EIS? What is a plan? What is a river plan? The plan is a series of options for how we will be managing the river corridors into the future. And what the river corridor is, it's a quarter mile from each side of the river. Just think of it that way. So about a quarter mile from each side of the river is the river corridor that's managed under the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. These plans address what will happen to that corridor in the future in terms of infrastructure, resource protection, number of visitors, user capacity, kinds and amounts of use, that type of thing. Just about everything that a national park does in the corridor is influenced or directed or guided by parts of these management plans. So the EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement, is a requirement under the National Environmental Policy Act that we analyze the environmental effects of whatever we're proposing in a major federal action. So those have to be very comprehensive and complete, and that's why the documents are so large. They analyze the effects of everything we're proposing on all the resources and values in that area. So a very comprehensive analysis of the effects of the different approaches or different alternatives to the plans, in the plans. So where we are right now is these two documents are on the street. There's copies out there, as was mentioned, there are summary guides. There are cards for the next public meetings that we're having. We've had a number of meetings already in the Tuolumne. We've had some webinars. We've had an extensive engagement process throughout, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. Okay, so where are these rivers? Well, you all probably already know, but I'm going to remind us. Right up here in the north of the park, of course, is the Tuolumne Wild and Scenic River. I must say that Yosemite is really fortunate to have two major wild and scenic rivers contained within its boundaries. The Tuolumne River was designated wild and scenic in 1984. It's the 54 miles of the river lie within the park boundaries, starting in the high country wilderness areas and passing through Tuolumne Meadows and then out past Hetch Hetchy and out of the park. This whole river system is designated wild and scenic. The part within the park is what we're managing under the Tuolumne River Plan. The Merced River, down here in the south, has two branches. The main stem, which starts up in the high country, again in the wilderness area, runs through Yosemite Valley, out through Upper Tell, and then down through the gorge. The south fork of the Merced starts up in the high country as well, runs down through Wona, and then out of the park boundary. Collectively, this is 81 miles of river within the park that we're managing in the Merced River Plan. So why are these plans so important? I touched upon the fact that they affect, or they control, they manage, or they direct almost every single aspect of park management within these river corridors. The areas that these rivers flow through, you can see they contain the most highly visited areas of the park, the areas where most of the development is concentrated. So a lot of the future of Yosemite, especially in our developed areas, is contained in the content of these plans. Down here, I'll show you the Yosemite Valley segment. You know, all these river systems I've talked about here, the high country and everything else, guess what gets the most attention and focus? The 8 miles, the 10% of the Merced that runs through Yosemite Valley. But there's so much more that we're doing in these plans. There's so much more of the significant resource that we're managing. Just don't want to lose track of that, because a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is going to be the Merced plan and the Yosemite Valley component. But there's much more to what we're managing in its entirety. So, just a little bit about the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. It was passed in 1968. It was passed at that time in recognition of the fact that a number of the nation's larger river systems were being dammed or diverted or otherwise developed. So in recognition of that fact, Congress said, you know, there's some rivers out there that are just too special. They have too many important characteristics. They're so rare, and we're losing them at a rapid rate. We want to take extra caution, extra protection. We want to put that in place for these river systems. So they passed the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. So what does that act really require us to do? It says, well, you know, first and foremost, we need to protect the free-flowing condition of the rivers. You know, no dams, diversions, or other impediments to river systems. Secondly, we want to protect water quality. Third, we want to protect and enhance the river's outstandingly remarkable values. Those are the values that make the river especially worthy of special protection. And when you think about Yosemite, you think, wow, everything's special. The park's already protected. There's so many things in Yosemite that are so special. What will the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act do for the park? What resources are we particularly interested in under this act? So we'll talk about some of that when we go through the presentation. And then finally, the statement in red, the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act requires a management plan to be put in place for each river under the designation that's been designated that will provide for long-term guidance for that river, looking out into the future. It may look good now, it was good in the past, but we want to keep it in that condition and make it even better if we can. This is a really important clause. And really, when I look at this and the more I've worked with this, it really speaks to the heart of what these plans are trying to accomplish. And it's a good way to center our thinking as we talk about the particulars. It says that each river in the Wild and Scenic River System will be managed to protect and enhance the values for which the river was designated. Remember, those are the ORVs, outstanding remarkable values, water quality, free-flowing condition, while providing for public recreation and resource uses. While providing for, that's an important piece of this clause, public recreation and resource uses which do not adversely impact or degrade those values. So there's a couple of messages embedded in this phrase. Protect and enhance. Protecting and enhancing river values is what these plans are intended to do. So what does that really mean? Protecting and enhancing sounds like, you know, we can kind of point to a lot of stuff we're doing as if we're protecting it. So what do you really mean? When you read further, it says, do not adversely impact or degrade. So protecting and enhancing means do not adversely impact or degrade those values. That's part of what we need to pay attention to, because later on I'll explain how we've actually used that phraseology to develop the plan. The second thing that's in here, the message that's conveyed, is that really the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act has two goals. One, protecting resources, the river values, and two, providing access. So providing use, allowing use. So it's saying, you know, protect the resources, but also provide use. So that is the nut to crack in the plan. Like if it was just one of those two, it'd probably be a lot easier. If you're just going to protect the resources, you know, it's complicated, but we can probably get our brain around that. If we're just going to provide access, well, that would be pretty fun to do too. I mean, it's easy to understand how that might work. When you try to do the two together, that's what takes us so long to get through the planning process, because you're looking at balancing off the different trade-offs. How much is too much, and what should we allow? And really wrapping your mind around what it means to do both of those things. That's why these management plans are very difficult to develop. That's why we come up with a range of alternatives that allows us to look at the trade-offs in those different choices. So I want to talk for a minute about this foundational piece. There's a few foundational pieces that we need to understand and kind of get our minds around before we move forward with particulars. The first foundational piece, and this is, when I say foundational, I really mean it, because this is how the planning team looked at this charge. We started from the very beginning, and we said, number one, we need to protect and enhance river values. That is absolutely, has to be part of every alternative. That's fundamental. So we started with that as a premise. The first thing we did to protect river values is we had to define them. Okay, defining outstanding remarkable values. Not an easy job, because so much of what's in Yosemite is already outstanding. So how do you pick the best of the best? The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, the council that helps implement that act and give agencies guidance and direction, gave us some verbiage that helped us with that. They said that outstanding remarkable values, for the purposes of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, need to be river-related or river-dependent. They need to be, which means they need to be located within the river and its immediate shorelands. They need to be they need to be rare, unique, or exemplary in a regional or national context, which basically means they need to be the best of the best. They can't just, they are the best among a number of other values that are also considered outstanding or exemplary. They're the top rung of values. They're the premier values. So we wrestled with that direction or that guidance, and we said, well, okay, that gives us something. River-related, river-dependent, okay. Owe its existence to the river, okay. Very, very important and rare in the bigger regional context. We came up with a list of values, and this started about 10 years ago. And all through this planning process, we revised that list. And the goal was to get it to be something that was tangible. Something that you could actually know when you touched it. You could know when you see it, describe it in such detail that it could be mapped, that it could be identified, and that it could be monitored. Because merely saying you have a value, but not being able to ascertain its condition today or even over time is not real valuable. It's how do you know how you're managing something if you don't know where it is precisely. So we worked very hard to define those values that are tangible and meaningful. The second thing we did was we asked our research management and science branch to tell us, well, okay, now we know what those values are. What is their desired condition? What constitutes a good condition for those river values? What should the meadow look like? What parameters do we measure to say that that river is being protected? They came up with what we call the desired condition for each of those values. They quantified it. They actually put metrics around it and said, quantitatively, this is what it means to have this value in a protected state. That was a desired condition. Then we asked them, remember adverse impact and degradation? We said, tell us then what constitutes an adverse impact, what constitutes degradation, and put it in quantitative form. So we know what we're trying to avoid. We're not just saying we want to avoid doing bad things, we know precisely what we want to avoid. So now we have desired condition, adverse impact, and degradation. We know where we're going, we know what we want to avoid. Do we know where we are today? That was the next piece of the puzzle. So where are we today in relationship to how these resources are being managed? We invested in over $1 million worth of research studies to shore up our data gaps, to shore up our knowledge base in these river values. And you know, Yosemite is a very neat place to work because it has a lot of data and information specific to the park. You know, when you're a planner, you usually have to extrapolate from areas that are similar to where you're working. Here we have data that was specific to Yosemite. Fantastic amount of information. Few data gaps we were able to shore up, so we had a very solid basis for determining what the condition of those resource values is today. So now we know desired condition, adverse impact, degradation, and where we are today. Incredibly valuable framework for putting this all into place. So then we said, well, okay, we know where we are today. Well, let's take a closer look. So to augment that general framework, we had an interdisciplinary team that essentially went segment by segment down the river, using their local expertise, their knowledge, their time in the field, the things they knew were areas that were affected or impacted in some way. We made an exhaustive list of all of those individual locations. We kept that in a database, and each of the alternatives addresses each of those site-specific areas. So we have the big picture, the framework, and the site-specific problem areas that we want to address as foundational to every alternative in the plan. So every alternative starts with that. Now, of course, there's more moving parts to manipulate, but that's the foundation for all of the alternatives. Getting all of the resource values up to a certain level and maintaining them at that point. So let's talk about, let's see, the conclusions. Here's what we found. When we did these baseline assessments, what we called it, where we did this kind of a look at all the resources we were managing for, the river values, and we asked ourselves, we asked scientists, what are the conditions of those values? We published a baseline conditions report. The updated version was published in July last year. And our findings were that we had a few areas that we were concerned about in particular. And we wanted to call out a number of these to share with you tonight. There are localized impacts to El Capitan Meadow, where the people got to view the climbers. There's a lot of social trailing for the meadow. The meadow's being impacted by that activity. That's something we wanted to address in all the alternatives. Riparian area between Clark's and Sugar Pine Bridges. This is the area along the river. Riparian area means the banks, essentially, that's being heavily impacted by human use, and that's where the river passes through the campgrounds, housekeeping camp. There's a lot of erosion going on in that area. It's one of our most heavily impacted stretches. We want to address that in this plan. The next item was the hydrological impacts of Sugar Pine Bridge. Some of our historic bridges are not built wide enough to span the river. This one in particular is a problem. So what happens is the river is moving downstream, its flow is concentrated as it goes through the narrow opening. When it shoots out the other side, it causes scouring down below, making a deep hole, and the riverbanks are widened as a result of that. It's an unnatural hydrological system that's developed from that bridge constraint. Some bridges have similar problems. This was the one with the most problems. The next thing we want to look at is generally out throughout the valley meadows, there's social trailing. You have people that, the easy way to go is where someone else went. They don't know anything anyplace else, there's no obvious path, so they keep taking the same path, and you get social trailing, which fragments the meadows and makes it a problem from an ecological standpoint. And then finally, the condition of some of our national historic landmarks. We wanted to bring them up to a higher standard. The meadows, restoring the valley meadows, the meadows are one of our ORVs, and this shows how people wanting to get access to the river are trailing through a lot of riparian areas, the meadow systems, and making these social trails. The next person sees it, thinks, oh, that's a good way to go. The next person sees it, so eventually it erodes and gets worse and worse. That's simply a matter of no better direction. People are going where other people went. If you direct them to a different place, they go there. We can show that with our boardwalks that we put in place. We've made significant improvements in the meadows with the boardwalks that we put in place. We can show photos over time and show how that means, what that means. But if people don't know, they're going to go where the last guy went. Removing riverbank riprap, in the preferred alternative, we are proposing to remove about over a mile of riprap along the river to allow the river to meander more naturally. Again, historic preservation of LeConte Lodge is an example of National Historic Landmark that needs some work to bring it up to a good condition. And then here's your bridge problem again. Now here, okay, so you've got, this is the way it comes together is, I think, pretty cool, because you've got your assessment, you know where you want to go, you know where you want to avoid, you know where you are, and you have a monitoring program that I haven't even talked about that we put in place to monitor conditions over time and take corrective measures if we start to see things slipping. That's all part of the framework. But beyond that framework, we have some very detailed site-specific actions that we've proposed in one of our appendices. This restoration plan, this comprehensive restoration plan, is included in Appendix E of the document. And for each alternative, we have a suite of actions. And I know you can't see this, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but the point is that there's a lot of stuff going on in this slide, and a lot of the activities that have been mapped here and displayed, all the different dash lines and X's and boxes and everything else, have been developed for each alternative. And what's represented here is the specific location in these different parts of the river corridor that we'll be doing these types of things. Repairing head cuts, adding fencing, removing pipe, delineating parking, removing roadside parking, adding boardwalks, removing social trails, rerouting trails, filling ditches, revegetating riverbanks, removing fill, removing riprap, and placing large wood. All of those are actions and more are included in that appendix. So the appendix includes the mapped locations, a list of the actions that will be taken, how they'll be performed, what techniques we'll use. It's very comprehensive. So that, in addition to the framework I discussed, is our program basically for protecting and enhancing river values across all of the alternatives. It's foundational to the alternatives. Okay, so now, the other thing that's foundational, and there's been a lot of talk about this, and I know you'll probably be really interested in this topic as well, is the facilities analysis that we did. I'm going to show you first the outcome of the facilities analysis, then I'm going to answer the question, why? So the outcome of the facilities analysis is some facilities that we're proposing for removing under all of the alternatives. And these include temporary housing, temporary employee housing for the concessionaire, the Wani swimming pool and tennis court, the village concessionaire garage, and the concessionaire general office, the swimming lodge swimming pool, snack stand, bike stand, and post office, the art activity center, the happy hour snack stand, the Curry Village ice rink, bike stand, and raft stand, commercial horseback day rides in the valley, the bulk petroleum storage in El Portal, and an old wastewater treatment plant in El Portal. So all of these facilities, and this sounds like a real hit list, but I had to do this because I wanted to tie this to the rationale for why did we do this? Because people ask, well, why would you propose this? I mean, what are you thinking? So here's some of the rationale. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, and the guidelines that implement the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, there are specific requirements for what's called a facilities analysis. And the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act tells us we have to look at all major public use facilities in the corridor and ask ourselves, is it necessary for public use? Is that facility necessary for public use? If it's not necessary, it should be removed. The vision of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is that it really is to provide for public use, but you don't want a lot of extraneous stuff in there. You want to maintain that integrity of the river system. So is it necessary for public use? If it's not necessary, remove it from the corridor. If it is necessary, can it be relocated out of the corridor? Can it be relocated someplace else? If you can't do any of that stuff, is it having an effect on river values? Is there some way you need to mitigate that effect, that you can mitigate that effect? You need to address it. You can't just leave it lie. So that's the first reason we did this facilities analysis. We wanted to follow the guidance in the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, take a hard look at these facilities. That summary of our findings is included in Chapter 7 in the document. The next reason we did the facilities analysis is this court decision. It's part of the court decision. The 2008 court decision that basically dealt with the Merced River litigation included this footnote. It's called footnote 5, and that's how we generally refer to it. And it says, to illustrate the level of degradation, there's that word, already experienced in the Merced and maintained under the regime of interim limits proposed by the NPS, we need look no further than the dozens of facilities and services operating within the river corridor, including but not limited to the many, and then it itemizes a number of facilities and services that it's alluding to as being evidence of degradation. And it specifically calls out swimming pools, tennis courts, sport shops, restaurants, cafeterias, bars, snack stands, gift shops, general merchandise, ice skating rink, amphitheater, rental facilities for bikes and rafts, golf course, dining hall, art activity center, etc. That would be a pretty comprehensive list of facilities and activities that, in the court's opinion, we really needed to make a conscious choice about whether or not those should continue. They were giving us a very strong indication. Review that, make a hard choice, take a hard look at it, and really make a decision about what you want to retain into the future. So as part of that court decision, there was that message from the court. And that's one of the reasons we've looked at these facilities and services, in addition to the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. The last reason we really had to look at this is just basically the footprint and the trade-offs involved in working with a very small land base. And I can show you some of what we learned together as we went through this process. This is the Merced River as it flows through Yosemite Valley. I always key off on housekeeping camp because it's kind of easy to identify. And then if we kept moving, we'd come into Curry Village, and the campground's over here. And then here's the Awani, here's Yosemite Village, itself in its entirety. So this is a general orientation of the river flowing through the valley. And this part here, of course, is the steep cliffs. The darker indicates a steeper terrain. A little darkness up here, so you're kind of framed in. This is the alluvial river valley. And here we have the high water mark. This is what we measure the river corridor from. quarter mile on each side of that. And here's the 100-year floodplain. This is the area it takes up, or takes out of the real good places to put things, because the floodplain is not a place you want to put a lot of development if you don't need to. Then we come into a quarter mile river boundary. This is what we're supposed to stay out of, if possible, for these public use facilities. So you want to stay out of there. So now you see that wow, there's not a whole lot left here. And now we add the rockfall hazard zone. So we add the rockfall hazard zone, and you have very little room to work with. So what the message in this is that, there are trade-offs involved in working within a limited land base. There are trade-offs involved. Do you want more camping? If you really want more camping, you really can't have more parking. If you want more parking, you really can't have more lodging, because all these things get balanced. And in the end, you have to make some choices. So that's the purpose of this. So that was kind of the third reason we needed to look hard at what was really going on in this small footprint. So now, coming to the draft preferred alternative. As Don said, to underscore this is a draft. This plan is a draft, subject to review and revision. And that's why we have the public comment period going on right now. So we've done a lot of really good thinking, we think, and we've identified what we think is the best option, but we need to hear from the public, have we got it? What have we missed? What do you think? What's your opinion of our work? Let me give you a little bit of background about why we think this is the preferred alternative. It's alternative 5. We have 6 alternatives, 5 action alternatives, and 1 no action. That's a requirement of NEPA. This alternative 5 does these things, and the reason where we came up with this, in part, was because of all the public input we've had to date. We've had over 40 public workshops, meetings, webinars, science presentations. We've shared everything we've learned as we've gone along this process. We had a series of workbooks where we published our preliminary alternatives. We said, hey, here's what we're kind of thinking, what do you think? All of this happened before the draft came out on the street. Now, I know you've probably been involved in a number of public processes in government, using government agencies follow. It's very rare, in my experience, that you've had much public involvement before the draft comes out. Usually you do scoping, then a couple years later, here comes the draft, and it's a large document. And you haven't had the benefit of that dialogue, either of us have. In this case, we've had the public engagement process prior to that very extensively. And every step we've had, every time we've engaged with the public, we've made an adjustment to our thinking. I was thinking about that the other day, and I actually was able to trace it back and see that trajectory. It was really neat to see that. So here we are again, draft alternative. And in all of that public involvement, what did we hear? What did people tell us? We heard that Yosemite has a special meaning in a generational sense. That people want to be able to come back with their families and have similar experiences and share those experiences with their children and pass those experiences on throughout the years. We heard that very strongly. And, there's something really special about Yosemite. It's kind of an essence of Yosemite thing. And people wanted us to retain that essence, that feel, what it means to come to Yosemite, so that they could have similar experiences with their children and their children in the future. People wanted to have a choice. They wanted to have a choice of how they access the park. They want to be able to take a private vehicle, or they want to take transit, but they don't want to have transit mandated on them. So the choice of access was an important concept. People wanted traffic congestion to be reduced. They wanted to bring a car, but they said, you got too many cars. So we're kind of like, okay, there's got to be a way we can make this work, but we need to fix that, because that's a major detractor from the visitor experience. The vehicle congestion and the problems that causes. They also said, when we come into the park, we don't feel, it doesn't feel like we're really entering this special place. You kind of divert us off to a day's parking area. We don't know where to go once we get there. You can look around, there's a temporary bathroom, it just kind of doesn't have what you'd expect in a park of the magnitude of Yosemite. We want a better sense of arrival. We don't feel like we've come someplace special. And the last thing was improving circulation, reducing congestion, and just providing for a generally more relaxed visitor experience. So, in looking at the alternatives we had to work with and molding them, we developed the alternative, the preferred alternative that we think responds to what we heard from the public. And remember, this is all on the foundation of protecting the resources. So, providing access, that problem of congestion. So what we did, we said, we really need to understand how this place works. because we haven't really looked at it comprehensively. So we hired some professional traffic engineers to model the system design, the system network of our transportation system. How things flowed, what the different pinch points were, how things operated, and where we had problems. To tell us where we had problems, they were actually able to quantify the things that we could do to make a difference and tell us how much difference it would make. So they told us three things, and you'll see these three things woven through the discussion of the alternative. They said you have pedestrian vehicle conflicts, that are slowing things down, big problem there. You've got failing intersections. You could do a lot better with your parking and put it in a smarter place. There's smart places to put parking and there's not so smart places to put parking. So all those things are causing problems with this circulation. So it's a systems problem. The take-home message from all that was that, you can't simply add more parking. You can't simply do this. Although it might seem obvious that would be the solution, it really wasn't. It was an integrated solution, a systems problem that we were facing. So we had to approach it from a systems perspective. So I'll show you an example of how we've done this in the preferred alternative. This is the current condition at Yosemite Days parking area. This is Camp 6. I know it looks like some sort of a part operation schema, but let me try to orient you a little bit, and I think you'll get the basic ideas. This is coming in from the park, Southside Drive. You cross over Sentinel Bridge. Sentinel Drive takes you up to this intersection. This is the intersection where these guys don't have to stop, but you do. So it says traffic, outbound traffic doesn't stop. And then you turn right. If you want to go into the village, you turn left. If you want to go on to Days Parking, you turn right and go down into Camp 6, the major Days parking area. So here's the village up to the north, the major Days parking area to the south. This is where a lot of our visitors, this is the first thing they know when they get to Yosemite and they reach the main area. This is the first direction that they're given. So they come in here, they park down through the Days parking area, which looks like this with the temporary facilities. And then up here, this is the village store. This is the parking for the village store. This is the garage on the other side of the road, the big garage that kind of is just kitty corner to the store. This is the concessions general office building. Okay, so what's going on in this picture? Right here, if you notice down here is the river. So you have major parking area right here, close to the river, right here, close to the river. Probably not a real good idea. It's something we really want to avoid. Here you have a faulty intersection. This is an offset intersection, so when people come out this way, or they come in this way, or they come out this way, or they come out that way, it's the only exit out of the parking area. So at the end of the day, all these people from Curry are trying to get out, all these people from parking are trying to get out, people from the village are just trying to get past the whole mess, and nobody knows who should stop. Because it's offset. So these guys stop, but is that guy going to stop? Or maybe he's going to stop. So everybody stops, and then it backs up over here, backs up over here, backs up, and everyone gets frustrated. So that's a faulty intersection there. At the same time, the pedestrian vehicle conflict is going on because people are walking from the parking area to get to the village store and the services, and they're crossing right in the middle of that intersection, right when people are trying to get something to happen. So it's a major problem area that we have with that. So that's a problem intersection, pedestrian vehicle conflict, and just a resource concern. So how do we handle that? In the preferred alternative, you'll see these in all your documents in the EISs that we provided. Volume 1 is especially interesting. Volume 1 has all of the alternatives, the site plans, it's got the existing condition, an aerial photograph like I just showed you for all of the no action alternatives, and it's got the site plans for what we're proposing. So here, we've overlaid the site plan on top of the existing condition that I just showed you. And right here, it's a little hard to tell, but this whole piece here is not included in the new site plan. All that parking is eliminated. So we pull that parking back from the river. We get rid of it and we restore it. That's one of the major restoration actions in the alternative. Okay, so the next component, and here we take that drawing a little bit further. Here's where the parking was. We pulled it back from the river. Some other things we do in this preferred alternative. Remember that faulty intersection? Well, we completely eliminate the north side drive that's up here, crossing here to here. We completely eliminate that. We reroute the road to the south, so now we don't have that pedestrian vehicle conflict. We actually add a roundabout here to facilitate transportation flow. So people can come in, go to the village, and come out of the village, go around. They can come out of the parking and go around. It just is a much better system of flow in eliminating that pedestrian conflict. We also have provided multiple exits out of the parking lot. Here's one, You can also go out the parking lot into the store. So multiple relief valves, so everybody's not trying to cram out of one small opening at the end of the day. Another thing that we've done is now you look, see what's missing. You know, you guys are like, well, you took away that parking, but, well, so what's going on with that? What we did is we moved the parking north, and then we added parking to replace the general office of the concessionaire. General office goes away, so we've replaced that with more parking, and we've replaced the village garage, the concessionaire's garage, with parking. So what we've essentially done with all of this is create a better sense of arrival for the visitor. They come in to the primary day use parking area. It's connected to the visitor services without any interruption by trying to dodge cars or anything like that. They can get right to the visitor services. They can get oriented. They feel connected to the larger complex. We removed the industrial and administrative functions from the heart of the village and really basically restored it for visitor use. So that's the biggest parking area, and that's that systems design. Not just one thing or another. It's about fixing intersections, fixing pedestrian vehicle conflicts, and rearranging your parking to where it makes more sense. Next thing we did, and another area that we worked on in the same fashion, is Yosemite Lodge at Camp 4 area. And as you're coming out of the park, now you're coming out Northside Drive, this is how you exit the park. This is the lodge complex, the main lodge complex with the restaurants and the registration desk and that, so that orients you a little bit. Here's where you walk across to see the falls. This is the entrance to the lodge. And then these are some of the lodge actual accommodations. So in our preferred alternative, there's a number of things going on here that we've changed. This is exactly what it looks like. I'm not showing you the no action, I'm just talking from what we're proposing. Here's that smart parking idea. This is west of the lodge. This area here is really underutilized. It's not very efficiently organized. It's kind of just a mishmash of activity it's a land base that's already disturbed. We looked at that and we said, man, if we want to be smart with parking, we would put it where people are already exiting the park. So they come in the morning, they come all the way through the system, they park here, they take the shuttle back, they do other things, they have a good day. They come at the end of the day, the shuttle drops them off, and they're gone. They're out the door. There's nothing beyond that that's going to cause congestion. They don't have to refiltrate all through this just to get out of the park. So that's a smart place to put parking. Another thing we did here was we looked at Camp 4. Here's existing Camp 4. Those little bubbles that you see are the existing campsites. We've expanded the parking a bit to really be real about what Camp 4 parking needs to be. And we've doubled the size of Camp 4 by adding 35 units to the east. Those are all walk-in units that we're proposing there. And then here, this was the big ticket thing. We've actually proposed a pedestrian underpass. So where that intersection that is so problematic, and y'all probably have experienced that, at the end of the day, you've got people that are dropped off here in the tour buses, they want to go see the falls, everybody else has had their fun, they want to get out, and you've got people constantly being stopped and traffic backing up all the way up the road. Manage it with parking personnel and traffic personnel, which work their hearts out. It still requires people to stop. You know, people still have to stop, and that little stop causes a big problem. So now people are saying, well, underpass, that sounds like a tunnel or some sort of creepy thing that's damp and dark and critters hide in it. I'm not sure I'm interested in that. Well, what we did is we asked a graphic designer to show us, underpasses, they're used pretty prevalently through many places, and it can be nicely designed. So we said, well, tell us what that could look like. And the feature that we looked at here, and the goal was to have a kind of pedestrian promenade that would start, it'd be ADA accessible, so it has to have a fairly gradual grade. It'd start back in the large parking area. They'd walk down this guided, basically directed path. They'd see the falls, they'd be seeing the falls all the way while they're walking down there, pass under the road and up to the other side, and that way they get access to the lower falls. This looked a lot different than what I had originally envisioned as being an underpass. And so it's more of an experience than a piece of infrastructure. Another thing about the smart parking idea I wanted to key off of this is in the preferred alternative, we have a couple of, we have one remote lot and we have a staging area. The remote lot is in El Patel. This is a place called Abbeville. If you're familiar with this area, okay, there's the Park Warehouse. This is exiting the park. This is towards Mariposa. Park Warehouse is here, I believe, and then over here we've got the, the Rancheria housing. So in between there's an area called Abbeville that has a trailer park where some of our concessions employees and temporary employees and some of the park partners employees have some trailers. It's not really well used right now, but it does exist. And adjacent to that, we are proposing to put in a 200-car parking area for visitors. So visitors would park there, get on the bus, and go to the valley, and taking the bus. And this would allow us to, again, be smarter with parking. At the end of the day, people come out of the valley, they're in the bus, they get into their car, and they go back down the hill. So this helps alleviate some of that congestion that we're seeing by having an option or providing an outlet for remote parking. Parking is not right in the heart of everything else. So that's that 200-car parking space. And then there's a 100-car staging area that we're proposing just south of El Capitan crossover, the El Cap crossover. The reason that's a strategic location is because that's the first time you have to change your mind. And the first time we can tell people to really change their mind. If they come in from all these different outlets, I mean, we can catch Albertal here, but people coming from Awona, coming from the Tioga Road, Big Oak Flat area, they get inside, they are inside the park. So the first time we can really connect with them and help turn them around and reorient them when things are busy is that what we came up with in that cost analysis was that the preferred alternative, we estimated $235 million to implement fully. So, people, well, that's a big number, what are you talking about? So how can that happen? And what we did is we looked at the revenues that come into the park on a fairly regular basis. These are revenues from gate fees, which we use for other projects right now, recreation fees. We have concessionaire franchise fees, which is a component of the concession's profits that come back to the park. We also have federal highway funds and some of our partners like Yosemite Conservancy. All of this money can be used to implement this plan. So we looked at that, we looked at phasing strategies, and we can find the way to fund a plan using those revenue sources without going back and looking for more appropriated dollars from Congress, and use the money that comes into the park if we use it strategically. And it's very complicated to match the fund sources with the projects and the phasing, and people always ask, man, you gotta think about it. You're impacting the visitor experience from the construction, you gotta figure out how to phase the project so they make sense. Yeah, it's a big project, it's a big deal, but we can do it. And I think it's important to recognize that, because this plan isn't just pie in the sky. It can really happen. These fundamental changes can really occur. So I'm going to skip through that stuff and come back to the very end. The public meetings, well, here you are. Step one, we're Mariposa. We've had public meetings